Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Revolution Will Not Be Televised. It will be streamed. We are your hosts, Dr. Richard V. Allman II and Reverend Stephen J. Thurston II. I'm using our government names, as they say, our government names today, because of the subject and the focus of our show. Somebody asked the question, who is this show designed for? I'm glad you asked. This show is designed for pastors, for entrepreneurs, for consultants, for digital content creators, for social media influencers, corporate executives, educators, parents, single professionals, and as my brother Stephen says, Lottie Dottie, and everybody who desires to maximize their potential, those who want to mobilize for purpose, and those who want to multiply their productivity. Let me give that to you again. This show is for everybody who wants to maximize what's in you, mobilize what's around you, and multiply what's for you. We're so glad you're here, and we thank you for joining this conversation. Listen, I know you're watching on Facebook, you're watching on YouTube, you're watching on Periscope, you're sneaking a glance on Twitter. So go ahead and share this on your timeline. If you're on Facebook, which is where this show emanates from, that's our cathedral. It's the Facebook Cathedral. Go ahead and start a watch party. Tell at least 10 people you like, who you want to see go to the future with you to join you. So go ahead and share this now. Now, listen, we come back and watch whether or not you're sharing this to your timelines. So we're going to start, Stephen and I are going to start getting rid of some friends. We're looking at you. We see you. We know how many people are sharing this. So go ahead and share this on your timeline now. Let them know that the revolution is live. And no, it's not on one of the networks. It's streaming. And that's how leadership looks and life is going to look from now on.
Yes, sir.
Much of our content, much of our engagement to empower others, it's going to be happening through mediums like this. So we want to help you to do life and leadership in the digital age. So while you're coming on, go ahead and shout out your city. We call this the quarantine roll call. Go ahead and shout out where you're on from. And we want to give a special thank you from my fellow hosts, Stephen and myself. We want to thank our first responders, medical professionals, law enforcement, government officials, pastors, and those who care for people all around the world. Thank you for what you're doing for people. I know some of you all are looking in that frame and saying, we see a very familiar face. He's a godfather of Chicago. I'm going to let his namesake introduce him, but I know y'all not even hearing what I'm saying because you see a face in here. Y'all don't care about me or Stephen or Jay. Y'all see a face. Y'all like, what did they have to do to get him on? He's actually strapped to the chair, y'all. We kidnapped him from his busy schedule, but I'm going to let Stephen tell you who he is. Stephen, what's going on, man? Good to see you. How you doing?
What's up, man? It's good to see you too. It's been a long 7 days since we last connected.
Yes, sir.
Life is well for you and you're being productive. I know you're being productive. You're on Facebook Lives and Zooms multiple times a day. So
well, I'm your friend. That's kind of the prerequisite for friendship with you. You got to have like 20 jobs, so
every day we hustle.
Yeah. Man, tell us who we got on. Of course, sure. Jay is a repeat. He's almost another host now.
Yeah. We've wrangled him on in. But
yeah.
JasperWilliamsIII, pastor of the church there. What suburb are you in, Jay? I can't remember. Is that Norcross?
We are in Norcross, but just metropolitan Atlanta. We're not, but just a few miles outside the perimeter. Yeah, and glad to be here. Dr. Thurston, honored. Thank you for the invite, Ricky. And Steve, thank you for bringing me on in.
For sure,
it's
man.
It's a pleasure, man.
We have, as Ricky stated, the living legend, nationally, globally, and one of the godfathers of Chicago.
Wait, hold on, Stephen. We got to officially initiate him.
All right.
Into the fraternity of the revolution. Will not be televised. It will be streamed. So we got to give this to him. Give that introduction one more time so we can give him a proper introduction. Say it one more time.
Globally known, for his preaching prowess and one of the godfathers in the city of Chicago. My dad is with us, Stephen Thurston Sr.
Yes, sir. He gets the Last Dance intro. He's truly a legend.
But Dad, thank you for taking time out of your schedule to come hang out with us for a little bit today.
Oh, y'all are gonna bless me. I don't know what I can bring to the three of you that you're not already doing, and you're already preparing us for so much of the future that's before us. It's just amazing. And as I look at you, I cannot help but go back in time and in history related to the Thurstons here in Chicago, up from Mississippi.
Wow.
My grandfather, and then my dad, and the Lord's blessing upon me to walk in their footsteps. Although I remember when I began to pastor the New Covenant Church, a preacher said to me, those are going to be some mighty big shoes that you're going to have to put on following your dad. And, I was young like you, so I didn't have any control of what I would say. And I said to him, I don't know how that's going to happen because my dad took his shoes with him.
Wow.
When God called him home. And I literally meant that because out of the three generations, my grandfather, my dad, and myself, all three of us were as different as we were in common. Yeah. And it still is something that I look at and wonder how it happened and how it's happening now. So I'm just glad to be with you, Rick. Glad to be with you. Also, I hear you preaching, and man, I say to myself, if I had some of that,
wow,
I could go forth in a mighty way. But God has certainly blessed you.
You honor and humble me, sir.
Bless you, man. And my son, he just got it. God has blessed him to stand on his own and to do what he does. I'm just filled with joy and all as I look at him and see what God is doing for him. And Jay, a nephew, a son of a great, great legend that so many of us have learned from. So many of us have taken what he has laid before us to be men of God, the right Reverend Bishop, Dr. Elder, all of that. Dr. Jasper Williams Jr. is a man that God has used in such a way and has laid it upon the lives of both of his sons. Not only this young man, but in the life of Joseph also. It's just, these are miracle working things that we are able to look at and see. And we are just happy for you.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Everything he just spoke is just like a true legend. I mean, legends live to love. They live to affirm. And so we thank you, Reverend Dr. Stephen Thurston Sr., for the affirmation you just gave. Like really the show is over now, actually. You just gave us the whole show. So Jay, you want to pray and we're gonna dismiss. Well, no, we're gonna open the doors of the church because after all of that,
Yeah.
I'll tell you what you just did for us, Reverend Thurston. You just set a bar, a high bar over all three of our heads for us to reach for. So
Yes.
we appreciate you for giving us homework.
Yes.
Or what I call destiny work. Everything you just said about us, we don't take it as if we are epitomizing or personifying what you say, but we take it as if we've got something to reach for. And again, thank you for being with us today.
Bless you.
Hey, Rick, may I just add in here amen to everything that you just said. But Dr. Thurston, I just want to say thank you for, as Rick said, being a template, something to reach for. And this really hurts my heart. And well, where the state of the generational divide is with preachers, with the older generation and the younger generation, it kind of gets, there's a little margin of error that's in there for how young is young and how old is old. But I really believe that the enemy has done a number on the fathers of the faith and the sons of the faith. There's a scripture in First John. It says, "Let the young men fight the battles," and it begins to tie it all together. And I simply say that even now, was with Dad for 10 years. Now the church is 14 years old. I still reverence and respect him and want to even fight battles that not only he shouldn't have to fight, but what I've been made for. I see that in you and your son. Yeah, Rick, I know today's supposed to be an hour. I don't know if it's going to be a part 3. I don't know if we can time down to the chair again. But while I think our hearts as this younger generation, it says the same thing, that I see your son, Steve, able to fight your battles and ready to fight your battles. And I think that the words that you've spoken really align to the final words of the Old Testament as spoken in the book of Malachi, when he said, "Lest the Lord turn the hearts of the sons to the fathers and the fathers to the sons, I will release." Really, judgment is what he's saying. And so the tenderness, the compassion that you had on those words, the honor. Let me say, we would spend time pushing back. You said at the very beginning, "I'm here to learn from you three." Us three would say, "We're here to learn from you."
But can I say to that, Jay? Can I speak to the wisdom of what he said? Let's just be honest. Let's deal with the elephant in the room. It's rare to hear men, generals and giants from his generation make the statement he made. And again, that speaks to the legend that he is, but it also speaks to his life of leadership. And while there's so many young men across the country that consider him a father and a mentor because of that posture. You understand what I'm saying? And I think we have to stop and pay attention to that. The fact that that's his posture, that as somebody that represents the boomer generation, he comes into this conversation. I mean, we know who he is. We know if he's a part of this conversation, he's the teacher. He's the sensei in this conversation. But yet he comes in and says, in sincerity, not in patronage, but in sincerity, I'm here to learn, because he recognizes the value of what has been placed upon us to serve our generation. And so I think that's important for us to note and pay attention to. And I hope that others that are in your generation, Reverend Thurston, will pay attention to that, because you saying to us that you've come to learn from us doesn't make us feel like we have anything to teach you. It just helps us to understand that we have to continue to grow so that we can be worthy of the posture that you have in saying, "Hey, I want to hear what's on you all's minds and in your heart." So thank you for that.
Let me say that it's relational in being the third generation, because everything that I'm saying has literally come out of the mouth of my father, who gave me the example and allowed me to model in my life what he received from his father, who was the foundation of our church, and the beginning of the legacy started with what many of the older people call the old man, who was the Reverend Elijah Thurston. And we relate to him even now at the New Covenant Church as the founder. He set the pace. He began this legacy, and he started what has become a generational blessing to the third generation and even the fourth generation, as Steve represents Thurston's here in the city of Chicago. And from being the founder, my dad became the mover of the whole legacy ministry among the Thurstons here in Chicago. My dad was the one who elevated the church, took the church, as many of you would say, to the next level, began to do things that his dad had not done, but wanted to see with all of his heart. My father moved to that next level and do what he hadn't done.
Wow.
And so looking at him as the third generation, all I did was to absorb everything that my dad did in terms of moving the church to that next level. And I've had the opportunity with the generation. I tell people that I talk to, it's amazing that I still have my grandfather's members at New Covenant Church.
Wow.
Your grandfather's members.
My grandfather's members. And I mean, they are faithful, they are there. And my dad's members, I've got that generation still alive. And then, you know, I got my own crowd. And all of that. And even, you know, where Stephen is right now, he has his own right there at the New Covenant Church. So, I mean, it's just amazing what God is doing and what I'm able to see God do in his life and in your lives. It's just great.
You said, jump in with a question.
Go ahead.
So when you speak about that lineage, Dad, was there some specific things that you did to differentiate yourself? I'm going to purposely do this so that I can create my own lane, or did it just happen organically?
No, it was a desire, but again, based on how my dad related to his father. I could see in him that he wanted to take the church and move the ministry to a higher level. And some of my grandfather's people back then, they were a little unable to grasp that. And, you know, they would go to my grandfather and Reverend John, he don't need to be doing this and he don't need to be doing that. And it was my grandfather that said, he's going to do it. And he has a vision and he is looking at ministry from a whole different spectrum. And when I saw that and all that he did to move New Covenant to that next level, it just moved me to want to move to a different level than he moved in.
Got it.
You first of all, it was amazing. You talked about the legacy of the Thurstons going to the third and fourth generations. That's truly a legacy of biblical proportions, literally. I mean, the Bible speaks in very exacting terms about the blessings going to the third and even to the fourth generation. But you said something in your introduction about your father, you know, people asking you about walking in his shoes, and you were like, no, he took his shoes with him. That statement and that observation speaks to our subject for today, which is living beyond the shadows. And I can't think of any better guest to have on than yourself, considering that you had to live in the shadow of two generals, your grandfather and your father. Speak to us, if you will, for a moment about the weight of the shadows, because people don't realize you can weigh shadows in pounds. It's more than a reflection of light. Like, shadows have mass to it. They're real matter. Speak to us about the weight of the shadows and how you navigated the two shadows that you had looming large over your life, and then how you balance those shadows with your own light.
Let me see, Rick. I had the blessing to be able to embrace both of them. I can hear my dad saying at some points when we would talk, you are more like your grandfather. And he would identify how I was more like my granddaddy than him. And then he would turn around at other points in our discussion and say to me, now, you are more like me about this than my grandfather. And so I began to see that. I began to be able to identify the ways that I was like my grandfather. My voice, my movement toward preaching, I got a lot of that from my grandfather. And my dad, in the areas of administration, in the areas of moving beyond the way my grandfather did things, was just in him. And I saw that. So I decided and said to myself, look at here, I have the opportunity to put both of them in me,
yes, sir,
and see what it's going to turn out to be. You know, and that has just been, you know, for me, a real blessing going forward, you know, in that life. And even now with my son, I see, and he did not know his grandfather. My father passed away in January of 1979.
Oh, wow.
And Stephen had just been born in July of 78. And so he didn't really know him, but there is so much of my dad in him. I mean, in so many ways. I see his opportunity to just take all of it me, my dad, my grandfather, and put it together in 4 generations. And I just get tickled, looking at him operate and see who this is right now.
So Stephen, I know you're my fellow host, but
Sure.
you're a captive audience today since we have your dad on, so we get to boss you around a little bit. So
I can
you
look at Jay's face. He already got something lined
right,
up.
yeah. So you become the subject along with your father. Like this is such a golden moment, and I hope those that are watching, particularly those that are pastors and preachers, and everybody has a legacy, right? Everybody has something you want to pass on to the generation behind you, those walking alongside you. And so I hope you're paying attention. I hope you're taking notes, because even though we're talking to a giant and general of the church, as well as having his son on, who's already a general in this generation, I think it's important to understand that what they're sharing with us are truisms and principles that can apply in any context of leadership, any context of mentorship, when it comes to the posterity of legacy and a vision living beyond you. So Stephen, with that said, and based on what your father just shared about how he embraced the mix, I was thinking about it. It's really all in the mix, right? So
Sure.
so the mix of his father and grandfather, and now, as he just mentioned, which is a perfect segue, the mix of himself into your life. So you've got 3 generations mixed into your life. I think it's important for us to talk about the fact that the shadow is only as looming as the brilliance of the light.
Sure.
So people can talk about, oh wow, this is a weighty shadow, but you have to consider the fact, if you have a large looming shadow, it's only because you have an equally brilliant light that's casting out something to really serve as a path. You get what I'm saying? So it's almost like, okay, you got a built-in safety mechanism, because even though I've got my own light, but if I keep walking with the shadows, that's a whole nother episode right there, how to walk with shadows. We'll have to bring the general and the giant back on for that one. So you've already got a return show, Dr. Thurston. But I think that's what our generation needs to learn, is we need to learn how to walk with the shadows, and not even just walk with it, but how to dance with the shadows. Dr. Thurston, your father spoke to how his father would say, that reminds me of your grandfather. Okay, that's more like me. That's dancing with shadows.
Yeah.
That's recognizing the generational blessing that is coming from multiple generations. So I need you to speak to, your father spoke to the weight of it.
Yeah.
But I want you to speak to the gift of it, because you've been gifted with 3 generations of large and looming shadows. And how are you dancing with that, man? I mean, we're watching you dance, and you're making it look wonderful. You got your dad dancing on social media. So you're literally dancing with the shadows, like literally.
He did that.
Yeah, I know. It's all on him. We know who to put it on, Reverend. Don't worry. You are not the blame for whatever he puts out there. So talk to us about how you're dancing with the shadows and how you're using the brilliance of that, because we always see shadows as a dark place, but actually it's a place of light, because you can't have it without the light. So speak to that.
Yeah, I remember several years ago when I first came back to serve in the pastoral role at New Covenant, I was invited to city council. Mayor Daley was in place at that point. They invited me down to open up council session with prayer. Did that.
Hold on 1 minute, Stephen. Somebody just said, Robert Jenkins said, I love what Stephen the son is doing. I've had the privilege of watching him evolve from a drummer to a drum major.
Oh,
I just had to interject that. Continue.
Thank you, sir. I said the prayer, open up city council. I'm getting ready to leave. And Mayor Daley, so anybody from Chicago knows the legacy of the Daley family. Mayor Daley sent somebody to chase me down to get me to come back. And I'm thinking something's wrong. And Mayor Daley said, you can't leave without me taking a picture with you. And that spoke a whole lot to me, that Mayor Daley and all his family was, and still is to the city of Chicago, wanted to take a picture. So I asked him, why were you pressed? He said, do you know who your family is in this city?
Wow.
And so we had that experience. There was another occasion, maybe a year later, I was at a function, Martin Luther King celebration, bumped into the mayor again, and he saw me from across the room, and he broke protocol and came over and found me. I just had to come and shake your hand and speak to you today. You're Stephen Thurston. I needed to shake your hand today. Elements like that, or being at other functions. Governor Blagojevich was in position at that point. He saw me across the room, broke protocol, made his way to me, and started taking me around, introducing me. Do y'all know who this is? This. He called my dad Bishop Thurston. This is Bishop Thurston's son. Y'all need to know him. Y'all need to know him. And all of that was because my dad and my grandfather and my great grandfather had made a good name in the city of Chicago, and having that good name has fallen upon me to give me accountability to maintain a good name, but it continues to open doors because there's a certain perspective that's associated with the name. You don't hear our name in mess. You don't hear our name in drama. People know that if we call a meeting, my dad calls a meeting, it's something serious, it's something substantive. There's no backroom shady deals going on. So all of that has been beneficial. It's been helpful. And then it's given me, because I came in the game at the high level. I didn't have to climb up the ladder.
Right.
I came in the game at a pastoral level. And again, that's another show, because I was in Atlanta and I didn't know that my dad had set things up for the church to have a vote for me to become pastor. And then I started getting all these phone calls and text messages while I'm sitting at Greater Travelers Rest talking about congratulations. So came in the door at that level. And so I've been able to, even with my consulting, because my dad brought me to the table and had me in meetings and introduced me to his friends. I'm hanging out with Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton, and being at those tables, I got to see stuff from a leadership perspective that many people my age didn't. And so taking that wisdom, that knowledge, those experiences, and being able to translate them to other people has actually created another stream of income for me.
Wow.
So the shadow has been beneficial in a multiplicity of ways. And then I'll close with this, going to the History Museum, the Black African American History Museum in DC. We were there together.
Which everybody needs to go to, by the way. If you haven't been, you definitely need to make that visit.
Yeah. So we're with this program that we do called Prime, as an outgrowth of Hampton, and we're walking through, and we're in the civil rights floor, and I look up on the big picture, and my grandfather's on there. And he's
Wow.
walking in front of the casket of his friend Martin Luther King Jr. And so we're pointing to the picture. So people start crowding around us like we're celebrities because my grandfather's on there. And I went back. I was there a couple of months ago, and I was there again. And I was pointing to the picture. And again, somebody came and said, what's up with you in this picture? I keep seeing you talking to people about it. And hey, that's my grandfather on there. So it created another kind of little level of commotion while I was there in the museum. So all of those things have been cool and beneficial for my growth, my development, and what I do for a living.
And it's amazing because you said it all with a smile on your face. And that says a lot. I mean, if you understand psychology, faces don't lie, especially in a moment of vulnerability. And so these questions were not preset. He didn't know I was going to ask that. It organically came out of what the father shared, what Reverend Thurston shared. And to hear all of that come out with the consistency of a smile says that his heart agrees with his head. And
Yes,
and you said something last week, Stephen. You said that the Thurston name represents freedom.
yes.
And I was thinking about that because you talk about your grandfather standing with Dr. King, correct?
Yeah.
And the fact that they not only fought for freedom, but as men, and particularly in this case, Black men, they were free in themselves.
Sure.
And of course, Reverend Thurston, you're still personifying that to this day. You stand in your own lane. You talk from your own voice, and we're thankful that You don't let the ventriloquist of politics or partisanship
Yes.
dictate what you say. And I think that's very important. Jay, I want you to speak to the same thing because, like Stephen, you have 3 generations that you're dealing with in your life. Speak to that. Speak to these multiple generations that you have. I think you talked to us last week. What was it? It started with your grandfather, right? Jay.
Actually, I'm 4th generation preacher.
So it's 3. And so I was right. So it's 3 generations. So your great grandfather, grandfather, and then dad. So just like Stephen. So you've got 3 shadows. Again, it's in the mix. So Stephen, write that down. I think we got about 3 shows out of this one show. You see what happens, Reverend Stephen, when you come on? we not only get the wisdom that you're imparting in the moment, but we're being inspired. We gonna keep you around. So so speak to that, Jay. Just like Stephen, you got this is so good. You got the benefit of 3 shadows, the safety, the security of those 3 shadows. Speak to what that represents for you and how you're dancing with it.
Yeah, so there are a couple of different dimensions that I could speak to, and the first is the natural. So much like Dr. Thurston, as you were talking about, Stephen and your father, and your grandfather, how Steve never ever had the mental ability to duplicate or to emulate what he saw in his grandfather. It's still here. It's in his genes, I guess you could call it. It's mental awareness month, and a lot of mental illness is genetic. So we have the paradigm of how even at the gene level there can be things that are passed down to the coming generations, whether it's body, whether it's mental illness, whether it's stature. Some people can eat whatever they want. The Thurstons are an example. Eat whatever you want, and you still have a waist. Now the Williams, I mean, we've got this natural gene thing that's happening, and my testimony is exactly Steve's, and Dad would say exactly what you said. I've heard exactly from my father what you said, Dr. Thurston, and that is, son, you got ways like your granddaddy. I said, Dad, really? I was 8 when my granddaddy died, and I really didn't even. I recognized him as my grandfather, even though the times spent with him was limited. It wasn't that ability to be able to see him do certain things. I can't remember one sermon that he preached, but yet my dad says the same thing. Boy, your granddad, he cried when he preached. Your granddaddy, he would go down and he would mimic things. He said, Daddy would say to me, now, JW, the older you get, the more like me you can become. And son, the older you get, and I can see that certain things, even the church that I pastor now, that those that know Dad, they go, that was your dad right there. I'm totally unaware. And the same way that it happens in the natural. Stevie talked about doors being opened, opportunities, people are going out of their way to accommodate you, recognition, all those things I say ditto to. But the one thing, that's the natural dynamic, and I'll end here, the spiritual dynamic, it's spiritual generational blessings that are passed down, much like mantles are passed down. Spiritual blessings. It's why Abraham even laid his hands, on his sons, and that thing continued to go and to turn into a nation. Here's the final illustration of how that spiritual generation works. I'm 3rd generation church planner. Think about that. 3rd generation brother preacher. So my granddaddy started Lane Avenue. My dad planted Salem East. And here I am. I'm supposed to be doing what I'm doing. My granddad had a brother, Uncle Buddy, my great uncle, my dad and Uncle Butch, me and my brother. It's just here. And so there's such a richness to being able to stand in shadows that if people, I think, would lean into the
Yes.
opportunity that's there.
Yes.
And some folk have spiritual shadows that they're trying to fight to get out from underneath. And Dr. Thurston, that's what I was trying to say earlier. Thank you for helping to mend the gap between your generation, not of natural born sons and fathers only, but spiritual fathers and spiritual sons.
Yes.
And that's good, because I was going to make a statement to all of the young preachers, young pastors. Find a shadow and get in it. And that's the opposite of what a lot of young leaders espouse to, but that's really what needs to happen. What you're hearing from us today, the reason we are where we are and the reason we're becoming what we're becoming, is because we have men in our lives like Reverend Dr. Stephen Thurston Sr., who provided shadows for us. My father, who went on to be with the Lord, bless his memory, April 15th of 2012. My wife and I were the last wedding that he performed. And I'll never forget it. He texted me, Reverend Thurston, early one morning. He was not a person that texts a lot. You know, y'all do enough talking with people. He didn't text much. And I get a text 2 a.m. And I'm his namesake. He would call me Big Baby. So he'd text me, say, Big Baby, I don't worry about you no more. You got somebody to take care of you. Because I got married later in life, but that's because, you know, I was thrust into ministry early. You know how y'all do us. Y'all put us to work. Early on. We're still praying for Stephen, by the way.
Pray hard.
I am.
As Reverend Jasper, the deacon, would say, pray hard, Sailor.
Hard. Over Napper. That's right.
We praying that God bring fulfillment to his life. No, but that's the power of our lives, is that we have a shadow, and we made the conscious decision to live in that shadow. So I'm encouraging young pastors, young leaders, find a shadow that's worth walking in. Because every shadow doesn't have the same value, but find a shadow that's worth walking in. Somebody says in here, they're a 5th generation preacher in a primitive Pentecostal Reformation. But it's important to embrace your shadows. Don't be afraid of it. Don't diminish them. Don't discount them. They are critical to your development. So find that shadow.
Now let me, Rick, if I can.
Yes, sir.
After my dad passed away, I was 26 years old, and I needed a pastor. I needed someone who could literally take the shoes of my father. And that individual happened to be the Reverend Clay Evans.
Yes.
Here in Chicago. And God would just have it be to put me under him, to embrace him as a father, and to give me the opportunity to have in my life a continual model and a continual pastor.
Mm-hmm.
And it just lifted me. It gave me everything that I needed then at 26 years old, and trying to pastor a 3rd generation church. It made all the difference in the world in terms of how I made it and how God led me home.
Wow.
So Dad, I'll jump in as we're facing the pandemic and things are shifting and changing. The world is moving faster rather than kind of slowing down. For pastors of your age group, your demographic, how are you handling, how are you wrestling with, how are you navigating this space that we're in? Can you hear me?
He lost the sound. There
I
he is.
lost the sound because I plugged in. I'm losing my power.
We can't have you lose your power. You're all
All
right.
right. But it's gonna go out. I got 9% left.
Well, we gonna use up that 9%. So keep talking till you,
Till you drop out.
yeah, till you drop
Okay.
out.
All right.
So my question that I asked was, as we're facing the pandemic, things are shifting, changing. The speed of change is getting faster, not slower. This can be probably difficult for people of your age group and demographic in terms of pastoring, because church looks totally different now. So how is it that you're making the adjustment with all the change that's taking place?
By accepting it. That's what those of us who are older, we got to accept this.
That's critical.
And connect with it. And as we sing in a song, we got to watch God work and get on the battlefield. You know, my generation sing that song, and some of them don't even know what they singing. But they need to get on the battlefield that God has prepared for the future and for the generation that's coming behind us.
Got it. Cool. Man, that's all the questions I have. Do you have anything else that you want to share with us?
Yes.
Just off the top, any words of wisdom or advice or correction or anything?
I see in all three of you again the willingness to accept your position now for what's going to be in the future. This coronavirus has set us up. They have really set us up. And those of us who are not willing to accept the movement that's created for the future going ahead are just, they ain't gonna make it. They're not going to make it. And the church is going to continue in their hands to just fall for the future, which is ahead of us. And that's the only thing that really burdens me with guys that are in my generation and all. They're not going to be willing to accept that they can change and that they can open the door to what has never, ever happened before. I mean, can't they see that this coronavirus is something that we have never seen before? But the reality is that it is transpiring before us. And until we get that attitude for the church, we're going to see the church crumble and go down before us.
Cool.
Well, we've heard from the prophet. Yeah. We've heard from the general. Listen, we want to go ahead.
Hey, Rick, I got one question, and it's in line with what Steve just said. Dr. Thurston, what would you, this is a two-way question.
How much more power you have, Dad?
7.
Okay.
What would you say to your generation about the coming generation? And then just one bit of advice or encouragement or wisdom, as Rick said. And then what would you say to our generation? And in either comment, it can be a positive or a challenge or critique or whatever.
One of the things I can remember now about my dad, he would get criticism from many of his friends in relation to what he did for me at that age. After I got out of college, came back home, he began to do things and allow me to do things that were going to be beneficial for the future. I remember when he took me down to the Cadillac dealership, and I'm just out of college. I'm just back home. And he bought me a Cadillac. I can't remember what's the name of that Cadillac. It was made like a box.
A Seville?
Yes, that's it, Jay.
Yep.
He bought me that Seville. And one of his good friends, I mean, just really, you don't need to get that boy that. You ain't gonna do nothing but hurt him and all of that. And my daddy told him, don't you ever say nothing to me like that.
Wow.
Again, he's gonna have this car. And as he grows, he is going to know how to handle things like that going forward. And I'll never forget that. And that's what this generation has got to accept now. God is blessing you with all kind of things for the future for you to embrace and move into. And my generation has no right and they have no responsibility to tear y'all down because God has blessed you with that. We ought to be happy for you. My daddy was happy for me. My father was happy for whatever I was doing. And he wanted in his heart for me to have and to do better than he did while he lived.
Well, Dad, after Corona is over, you can take me down to the Ferrari dealership.
Oh, Lord.
Y'all got, Rick, you got to help me now.
I look, I hear you, but it's already recorded now. This is going out around the world. Everybody heard it. So I'm praying for you.
Hey, Steve took that principle, put it into play.
You heard that, right?
Dad wants me to be able to handle Ferrari. My future.
We got your back. We got your back. Listen, you all, this conversation is timeless. This conversation is transcendental. This conversation has been transformational. This is one of those conversations that we just gonna tag it a legacy conversation. You'll want to listen to this for years to come. I know over the last few weeks, we've been taking conversations and moving them into our group, which we're going to invite people to join in just a moment. But the conversation from last week and the conversation this week, I believe they're so timely that we're going to just leave them out here in the ether. So I'm asking everybody that's watching now, if you haven't already shared this conversation to your timeline, go ahead and do it right now because you're going to want to come back and watch this. We're just going to call him Pop for today, and that's out of reverence. He's all of our surrogate father today. And Stephen, he's still trying to figure out if he wants to own Stephen anyway. So, no, I'm just playing. So me and Jay got the sons covered. But go over right now and join the group. The revolution will not be televised. It will be streamed. Stephen, I love this logo. I'm Pop Thurston. I'm still learning my Chicago colloquialisms.
Okay.
So one of the ones they told me is fire. I don't even know if you heard, but the young people say that's for fire. So when something's really hot, really popping, really in vogue. As a matter of fact, I wore my hat today in homage to you.
See.
Yeah, because I've seen you going in the mayonnaise with your hat on.
Sir. Yes, sir.
So, and it doesn't matter what season it is. He's got a hat for every season. He covers all four seasons. And so my wife told me, she said, put your hat on. You going on with the general. So I wore my hat in homage to you today. But go over and join the group. Stephen, you've got the Mirror Moments movement coming.
Yes.
I'm excited about that. I saw the logo. The logo is fire. Okay?
Thank you, man.
It's fire, man. So I'm excited. He also has the book Mirror Moments. Just go to StephenThurston.com. Get everything there. Stephen and Jay, people have been speaking to the collaborations that are happening between us. And they're enjoying the fact that we're not only showing deference to one another, but we're intentionally promoting each other. And I think, and to us, that's normal. Again, when you have a father on like Reverend Thurston, you understand why we're wired the way we're wired. We were raised by selfless men. We were raised by men that knew how to take the best of themselves to bring out the best in others. So you can't really give us the credit for this. We're just doing what we saw. And I appreciate people acknowledging that. And so it's so important to promote each other, to encourage one another. So go to StephenThurston.com. He is a leading consultant in project management, in people management, in purpose management. So go to StephenThurston.com. You'll find everything you need there. And then, of course, Pastor Jasper Williams III, he and his wife, in their inimitable way, is literally shaping the conversation about relationship as it comes to marriages and helping singles. And so, matter of fact, they're going to be on Sunday. Right, Jay? What time?
That's right. Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And we do a Facebook Live, and it's on our Facebook page, Join Team Us. Really simple. The name of it is Team Us, but the Facebook page is Join Team Us. And actually, we kind of attack issues that you don't hear largely spoken in church,
right?
And kind of go there. This week, though, instead of Team Us, we're doing Team You, YOU, because we want to do something for singles. And so we're talking the controversial issue of online dating.
Oh, wow.
We got some guests that have had some horrible experiences, some that have had some awesome experiences. One even hadn't gotten the confirmation yet. Well, one that I came across, met online, got married. And so we just want to be relevant.
Right.
We're talking to married, engaged, seriously dating, and curiously single.
Cool. So what is your website, Jay?
Well, we have one. I don't want to put that one out yet.
Okay.
Because I'm transitioning.
That's fine. So just connect with him on social media.
Join Team Us, IG, as well as Facebook.
All right. And Jasper Williams III.
That's right.
Stephen comes on Tuesdays at what time?
3 p.m. Central Standard Time.
3 p.m. And before we lose Dad, if you're still here, if you'll pop your video back on, if you can quickly. I know you're probably down to 2%. He's like gone.
Battery's gone.
We love him. We were so glad he was on. And now our four screen just split up. So it means it's time for us to split. Thank you for joining the
info, Rick.
Yes.
We got to drop your info.
Man,
Rick is on
I'm just hanging out with y'all.
Please, whatever. He's dropping some brilliant nuggets Thursday nights at 8:30 p.m. Central Standard Time, and then every day at noon.
Yes.
He's dropping some amazing information.
Thank you.
RickyAllmon.com is also where you can find him. He's got his Audible of the devotional that he wrote. So that's on all platforms.
Yes.
Follow Ricky Allmon, brilliant guy, consultant, preacher, whatever you need him to do, he's going to adjust it and fit right in and do it with the level of excellence. So please plug into these guys. They're amazing in what they do.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank y'all for joining us. We'll see you all next week on The Revolution. Will not be televised. It will be streamed. We'll holler. Bye-bye.